Hello and welcome to Maths on the Move, the podcast from plus.maths.org. I'm Marianne Freiberger.
And I'm Rachel Thomas. This is the last episode in our special Euromaths series of podcasts reporting on the European Congress of Mathematics, which took place in Seville in July. This time we're going to be hearing about some history of mathematics, I think, that you learnt about while you were there, Marianne. Who are we hearing from today?
So I talked to Reinhard Siegmund-Schultze, who won the Otto Neugebauer Prize in the history of mathematics at the ECM. It's a prize awarded by the European Mathematics Society. Now, Reinhard was born in the GDR, so that's former East Germany, and he has worked and written about mathematicians who had to flee Nazi Germany. And that's very fitting because Otto Neugebauer was an Austrian-born historian of maths who experienced the ascent of the Nazis and its impact on mathematics himself and eventually left Germany. Reinhard gave a great talk about Otto Neugebauer at the ECM. In my conversation with Reinhard, I started by asking him where his interest in this topic came from.
Well, it might have been politically motivated too, because, traveling and moving outside East Germany and the Eastern Bloc was always a problem. And so, in addition, we were, of course, in a confrontation in a way with West Germany and with different looks at the past of Nazi Germany, and all this contributed for somebody who was basically supportive of the communist society in East Germany attractive, but also a possibility to utter some indirect criticism of the regime at the same time, because obviously there were parallels between the events which happened during the Nazi times with this leading party of the national NSDAP and then our SED party. But I think one has to do these comparisons very nuanced, of course, but it stood up we were always under political pressure to defend ourselves, our regime, or to propose something for change, or political change in the East. Yeah.
So obviously a regime like the Nazi regime it impacts on the people and it impacts on structures within mathematics, for example. But is there a way in which it impacts on the actual mathematics that is being done, or how it's being done?
Yeah, well, again, a very interesting and question which has to be answered in a nuanced way. So certainly there were tendencies to support some areas of applied mathematics by the needs for rearmament or whatever for weapons production in Nazi Germany, but this basically affected only the technical universities and not so much the traditional old universities where certainly mathematics did not expand at the time. Even the student numbers declined, but the most practical consequence of all was, of course, the expulsion of these Jewish mathematicians in 1933 and until 1935 or so, because there was traditionally and historically, for also partly sociological reasons, a high percentage of Jewish mathematicians among the mathematicians, and all those were just expelled without looking at their merits at all. So, which of course tells something about the esteem in which, or the low esteem in which mathematics was held by the regime. Of course, at the time, science in general didn't have such a high standard within society as it has today, and was not that important compared to the level which we have today, although we have attacks at science today too. Again, this for other reasons partly. So we do have direct effects on mathematics massively. And around 1933, Germany was still the leading nation internationally in mathematics, and this has totally turned around after the war.
So it basically killed mathematics in Germany?
Yeah, for a while. I mean, they had problems really to reconnect to internationally and they were to the scene after the war, and so they were partly barred by some people, but they also, yeah, I mean, of course, then the East, came the Cold War and Iron Curtain, so that they couldn't travel anymore. So this was that part, and on the other side, many young students from Germany tried to go to the United States to study. We had a parallel development, of course, in East Germany, where people went to Russia for studies, which was emerged then as a very strong nation within mathematics. And well, and again, another turn then later on. This really helped then later on to connect between Russian and American mathematics, because you had some people who could translate between the two cultures.
So East German mathematicians could form a sort of bridge between the East and West.
Yeah, and as Reinhard told me, it's actually remarkable that at the reunification of Germany, the Institute of Maths at the East German Academy of Sciences, that was the Karl Weierstrass Institute, it survived because there wasn't an equivalent in the West. Also, dismissals among mathematicians after reunification were much lower than amongst physicists, because physicists are often involved in secret work for the state, or perhaps even in defense, which then meant that they had to sign papers to keep such secrets, and West Germans found this unacceptable, and therefore they dismissed these physicists. Among the humanities, the number of dismissals was also great, seeing that teachings in the humanities were often seen as associated with state ideology. As a historian of science, Reinhard himself was let go. In fact, his whole Institute for the History of Science was dissolved, and he had to wait 10 years until he got a position in Norway.
Well, it's amazing to hear how his personal story sort of fits in with the story of the research that he's talking to you about. History of maths is such a fascinating area, of course, and most mathematicians are aware of the history of maths in the sort of area they work in themselves, but not so many, I think, have awareness of the broader history.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly in my mathematical training, we did learn, the most important sort of cornerstones in history. But that was it. There wasn't really a broad picture. So I asked Reinhard how important it is for a working mathematician to be aware of history in a broader sense.
Well, I mean, the Nazi past shows clearly that one should be concerned about the political conditions under which science is being done, and also mathematics. And of course, when we look at Neugebauer, these are very ancient topics, and we could argue they are differently. But as I try to show in my talk here on Neugebauer, I think even Neugebauer was forced to take some political stance at some point, and he even did it by his science, by his research into history of old Babylonian mathematics and astronomy, by showing the diversity of peoples who were involved in creating this old mathematics within Babylonia or Mesopotamia, but also compared then to Greece, where again other populations were involved, and he used this example as to underline the need of collaboration between different languages, different traditions in mathematics, which was quite opposed to the Nazi doctrine of the pure Aryan mathematics was supported by people like Bieberbach, the function theorist in Berlin, and so he used this as a political argument. And then at some point he couldn't bear anymore to stay in Germany. Although he was not Jewish, he left then. So, but people are different anyway. Some people are interested in their history, or others not. So it's just an offer from our side to help also to bridge the culture. I spoke about bridging before, but the bridging of cultures is today in this ever more diversified science a need, I think, of the day, and the history can help to bridge the kind of gulfs between humanists and scientists, and in a sense.
So, what do you think about this particular time, about now here in Europe? What do you think characterizes mathematics now? What do you think historians of the future will say about now? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, you are touching a precarious topic. Nobody of us knows, of course, what future brings, and many things are changed now, beginning with, we talked about in the discussion about correspondences which do not exist anymore in the old sense. So we have certainly correspondences in masses, but then we have maybe an abundance of information in the email which would have to be sifted, and the kind of minor details or the not typical has to be separated from the important facts in these correspondence, because people do not control their correspondences anymore so kind of carefully as they used to do before. This is one point, and then of course all the computerization of mathematics puts a totally different character on mathematics. The notion of proof has greatly changed in recent decades, connected to, of course, to algorithms and constructability and all these things.
Yes, I guess it remains to be seen what exactly is going to happen in the future of mathematics. But what Reinhard said about the nature of proof changing in the light of computers being brought in, that's really interesting, because Rachel, earlier this year, you saw some really interesting talks at the Isaac Newton Institute in Cambridge about formal proofs, didn't you?
That's right. It was at the workshop called, I think it was called Structure and Randomness, and it was held in honor of Tim Gower's 60th birthday. Tim Gowers won a Fields Medal, and what was really interesting about the workshop, which featured many people he'd worked with over the years and from areas of mathematics that he has contributed to, there was a really strong theme of collaboration across the whole workshop. And one particular talk that we ended up writing up in detail was by Terry Tao, who's also a Fields medalist, about his work with Tim Gowers and colleagues proving an important result in combinatorics. And they proved it both traditionally with a traditional mathematical proof, but they also created a formal proof of the result using automated proof checkers and sort of verifiers. The fascinating thing about this approach is you actually open yourself up to totally different new ways to collaborate with other mathematicians, which was just really interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So computers have changed mathematics, not in the sense that they replace mathematicians, but they also open up just completely new avenues of working. So that's it for this episode of Maths on the Move. And we'd like to thank the London Mathematical Society for making possible our trip to the European Congress of Maths.
You can find links for some of the content that we've mentioned during the podcast in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do recommend us to friends or rate and review us in your podcast app, which will help other people to find us.
Thanks for listening, and bye for now.